welcome to the first edition of our Questions for the Club series. We've opened the door for supporters, club partners to direct their questions to different officials at Torquay United, and you are first on the list. As you can imagine, the response has been numerous and diverse and varied. There's obviously too many questions for all of them to be answered, but we've endeavoured to cover pretty much every aspect of, or every angle that's been asked. However, I have limited it to one question per person so that we get a broad range. So I'm going to start with Paul Butler, a 44-year-old supporter and shareholder from Twickenham. Paul's question is one that has been asked by a number of those who have submitted questions to the club. He asks, why was no money made available to strengthen the squad at such a key part of the season?
Okay, good question. Well, the first thing I would say is that as probably everybody will know in relation to football clubs generally, the acquisition or sale of players is a product of a lot of discussion about values, etc. And all of that has to come together before a decision is made. In this instance, there was not a situation where there was a categoric, there is no more money. But there was a situation where in everything we do, values were assessed. The outcome of that position was that no acquisition was made. Now, that has a balance against the perceived strength of the squad going forward, etc. So there wasn't a specific reason that I was saying, or anybody was saying, there is no money. What's the outcomes? I mean, there is speculation around why that outcome was that we didn't make a signing, but it's not specifically for that reason. The other thing I go on to say is that in terms of our investment into the squad, that has actually strengthened considerably over where it was as a budget when we came in. I think we've been in here about 7 weeks. So it has been strengthened twice in that time scale. Yeah, I mean it's a reasonable question, but I think the answer is not what necessarily the media or the social media are speculating on.
I would just sort of move further on to that question, if you like, and although the official ratification from the National League came, I believe it was February time, you guys and GI were in the building from around Christmas. Looking through the track record of players acquired since then, there's actually been quite a lot of movement in and out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that from memory, I think we've got at least 8 players coming in, some going out.
Is that those 8 players, I presume, is permanent and loan and
yes.
contributions that we make to a loan
into the squad? I mean, they at the end of the day in budgeting, they all end up with a monetary value. I mean, in the overall sense, if you look at it, I mean, when we came in around the turn of the year, the playing budget, which was set out, I mean, rested in the top half of the league in relation to its size. Since then, we've upped that budget on twice through the process that we're talking about, and we've seen players come in and we've seen players leave. And the other thing I think which is relevant is that when a player leaves, I mean, essentially the budgetary value of that stays. So it's not as though I'm talking about a situation where we're taking money out of the budget when a player is sold or leaves. That stays in there. So these increments that we have made are actually increments. They're increases on the position. So I mean, in terms of where the budget rests, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable that we're not scrimping. Put it that way.
Okay, thank you, Clarke. Question 2, and doesn't get any easier. Steve from Brixham stands on the pop side. He would like to know whether there is any truth in the suggestion that the manager was given some sort of contractual obligation or ultimatum when it came to that week before deadline day.
All right, so I mean, again, probably some stuff on social media, and I recognise that social media is a great phenomenon, but it does lead to a lot of rumour. In its underlying situation, I mean, I wouldn't even talk internally to you in terms of the contractual arrangements with anyone in the club. You know, their salary, etc. That's private and must remain so. The other thing I think you know, and I hope everybody else in the club knows, is that the key thing for us in terms of our relationships with the staff is that they must feel comfortable, they must feel motivated in that process, and the team manager, I mean, would be at the top of the list for the necessity to be motivated in his job, but everybody has to be. And if you think about that, I mean, you again, from my experience, you can't motivate individuals by threat. I mean, it doesn't work. So that's my view on how you motivate people. So you can read into that what you want, but I won't discuss contractual arrangements with anyone on air.
Okay, next one on our list is Tim Discombe, who's asked, what is Jeff Harrop's actual role and what specific tasks has he been set by the owners of the football club?
Okay, well, all right. Jeff, as you know, is a Torquay man. You will know that he's extremely knowledgeable. He's very enthusiastic around football, and that's one of the reasons that we brought him in. Looking at his task, he is the general manager. That means that he's responsible for the general management of the club, the general management. So he pulls all of those people together. So he makes the club hopefully perform as one. In terms of specific tasks under that, I mean, you all people get tasking underneath their general job. So he's got some things to do specifically, which we've set out and agreed with him at day one. I mean, he's got to coordinate the 5-year plan, which is an ongoing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, not necessarily now, but in the future. So he's got to do that, and he's got to bring together our youth and academy policy. So he's got to deliver that. He's got great skills in that area. So those are specific tasks. But in general, he is the general manager. So he's got a bit of burden on his shoulders, but he's just got to bring everybody together.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Phil Coombs, who has asked, how important do you think it is to avoid relegation this season as part of our 5-year plan?
Well, I mean, very, very important. I mean, and I think it's worth saying that everybody in the club is absolutely concentrating on that task. So, and there has to be that general determination in the club. So it is very, very important. If we don't make it, and you have to look at those, do I think it's catastrophic? No. It's a rung on a ladder. I mean, our aim is not to be in the National League. Our aim is to be in the league, and to move in the league.
Do you mean the Football League?
The Football League, absolutely. So, I would. It is vital for us, but it's not catastrophic. And if we go down a rung on the ladder, that is what it is. We've just dropped a rung on the ladder. I mean, we'll be back because the 5-year plan looks at that. It's just one step down before we go up.
So when you use the phrase "not catastrophic," is that done in the context of the 5-year plan, that that it wouldn't mean any of that is abandoned?
None. No. I mean, nobody. If it did happen, nobody would be walking around with their head down. I mean, we've just got to get on. We've got to do better, and we've got to get back. I mean, that's the whole process. So the plan isn't abandoned. The plan is a plan. I mean, that's what we're going to achieve.
Okay, our next question is from Ross Kanyuk, who is 54 from London and a supporter for nearly 50 years. And he asks, when we hear about Torquay's supposed minimal budget and financial constraints, it makes us sound like poverty-stricken football club, and more so than teams that pull in half the crowds, is how he phrases it. The rather blunt question is, where is our money being wasted?
Well, okay. Well, two parts to it. One is what he says is that we have a minimal budget. I don't think that's the case. I mean, this is a big club, and its budget, as I said, even before we arrived, and we've only added to it, was in the top half of the National League. So I don't think it's a minimal budget. The other thing is I hope that no money is wasted. I mean that's the general philosophy. This club doesn't waste money. Whether there are areas within the club, and I'm sure there are, where improvements need to be made in the financial controls or in the financial choices that are made, I'm sure that's the case, and it's an ongoing scenario. When we came, I mean, I think it's probably right to say that when we've opened doors here, there are a lot of skeletons in there. Our job is not to be frightened by those, but actually to just go about burying them, and that's the process everybody's on. And wasting money is not part of that.
Have there been skeletons that have surprised you?
Some, yeah. I mean, it takes a lot to surprise me now. I think I'm just too old, but yeah, there were things that we didn't expect. Put it that way.
Okay, Jonathan Jones has been supporting Torquay United for 19 years, originally from Totnes and now lives in Reading. He asks, are you aware that Torquay United is over 100 years old and with a large number of passionate fans who travel the length and breadth of the country every week in support of their football club?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things I think we said very early on. I mean, it's one of the things that really attracted us when we first arrived and we're talking about the club and our involvement with it. I mean, it is a fantastic club, as you know. I mean, it's a big club. So I'm really aware of that, and I hope that everybody in the club, everybody who is employed here, is fully aware of that, which I'm sure they are. And I think our drive is to recognise that position. I mean, supporters are everything. They're actually why we're here. So that's the purpose of it. That's without those supporters, without those customers, there is no reason to be here. So they are everything.
When you do visit the away grounds, and it's impossible to go to everyone because I know you've got other business commitments. However, when you do talk to fellow directors and you dig a bit deeper on our away support, it is something that is perhaps uniquely special to Torquay United. The miles they cover and the noise they make after such a journey.
Sure. I mean, and I don't know why that is. I mean, you're absolutely right. It certainly is the case. It comes over time and time again. it could be historically that because Torquay is in this part of the country, and those supporters have always had to travel, and they've done so over many years, and it's part of the psyche. I don't know why it is, but it is a phenomenon, and it's fantastic. It's so what would I say? It's almost the lifeblood. It's the thing that is so attractive about this club.
Okay, thank you. I move on to Phil Perkins, who's 62 and lives in Exeter, but brought up in Torquay and a United fan since 1965. Phil asks, why has there been no press conference?
Why has there been no press conference? Well, there is a press conference that takes place weekly, every Thursday, I think. So, and that is the press conference about the business of the club. I mean, it's the press conference about what's happening at the very heart of the club. I don't believe in press conferences for the sake of them. I think there must be press conferences when significant things need to be said and discussed. And indeed, as we go forward, press conferences outside of those club press conferences will occur. But you need a press conference when you've something to say, and me droning on about how good I am is not really of any note to anybody.
Okay, Richard Inman is a 37-year-old fan from Tavistock, and he asks, please can you explain why we have hired a head of recruitment at this stage, and what exactly is his role now and for the future?
Okay, three reasons. And three roles, essentially. One is in analysing and looking at the opposition. He that's his job. He has to analyse that. He has to have a dialogue and a similar language with the manager. So part of his role is looking ahead, looking at the opposition that's coming up, understanding them, and reporting that back and discussing that with the manager so that he can put that into his team selection, into his tactical analysis for the game. So he's prepared. Really, really important, I think. Second is in terms of what it says in the title, recruitment. It's an essential part that we must find talent, and he has contacts, experience. He can recognise talent. He can discuss those positions. So that's why his tentacles have to go out, because this club, like any other club, is reliant on talent, and it has to find it. And the last, number three, is that he's very much locked into developing our youth structure and our academy, which again is so fundamental for the club in its long-term future.
Thank you very much. Okay, 26-year-old Joe Barlow asks, what is happening to increase revenue streams into the club?
Well, first of all, let's recognise what they are. I mean, a revenue stream for a club, and they're very varied, ranges from a supporter going through a turnstile to the landing of a major sponsor, and there's an awful lot in between. The general view and the ethos that we're developing in the club is that all revenue streams are precious, all of them, and all of them have to be looked at, all of them have to be developed, all of them have to be sustained. So wherever they are, our aim is going to be I know it's easily banded around, but it has to be customer satisfaction or supporter satisfaction, so that whenever you interact with the club, whenever you do something with the club, whenever you provide revenue to the club, we've got to make sure that you have a feeling of value. You're valued, and you have a feeling of value for what you've spent, whether it's money or indeed time. So everything we do in all of those areas, we have to give value, and everybody in the club and all of the people working have to work towards that goal. So if you buy a snack at half time, you have to think you had value. You know, if you sponsor the club, you're a major sponsor, you have to think that was good value. You know, they responded, the club recognised me. Wherever you go. So there's a drive throughout those revenue streams.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Lucy in Brixham, and she would like to know, where are we with the proposed formation of a local board?
Oh, all right. Well, when we arrived, we said, look, we really need to develop this local board. It's really important, and we set ourselves then, I think, getting ourselves into a position by the end of the season, and I think we're on track in that process. We're talking to an awful lot of people, very, very interesting people. But being a director of a football club is more than saying, I think that's going to be a good idea. I can really do something. I mean, it comes with a lot of responsibilities. So people have to think very carefully about it. And I think the other thing which is probably key now is that through circumstances, as they say, beyond our control, that is just taken a bit of a back burner, because everybody needs to look at our position in the league. Everybody needs to concentrate on the club's performance now, between now and the end of the season. So that work has just taken a little bit of a back seat, but we're on track, and I think that in the close season we'll be able to pull it together.
Okay, thank you. Just a few more to go, and the next one is from Brian McKenna, who is 60 years old, born in Torquay, and has always supported the club. Brian asks, why is it necessary to invest funds in the freehold of Plainmoor when a long-term lease is held from the council by Torquay United Football Club at what is believed to be reasonable terms and conditions and affordable annual rental cost?
Okay. Well, in its fundamental position, what we're doing, and we have to continue to do, is invest, and we're going to be investing in the club, and we're going to be investing in the bricks and mortar, because things have to change, they have to be improved here. The fundamental position is that what we want to get to is the club owning its own ground, because that underpins the investment that is made.
When you talk investment, do you mean investment here, as in Plainmoor?
Yeah.
Investing in what we've got right now?
Sure. I mean, there's work we've got to do, and there are changes we've got to make, and there are improvements we've got to make here. But the fundamental position is that I think the club needs to own its own ground. It needs to be able to attract investment. It needs to be able to deal with its own destiny. So that's the fundamental underlying reason why I think it's important.
Our next question is sort of on the similar theme, really. What happens, and it comes from Richard Glynn, what happens if the council decide not to sell the ground to Gaming International?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. And I think that from everything that I know so far in this process is that the the council, the landlords, want to see investment into Torquay. They want to see a successful club. They want to see facilities, and they want to see those facilities, whether they're here or elsewhere, modern. They want to see them used. They want to bring investment into Torquay. So I would hope that that overview will prevail, and that everybody will say absolutely this is a good thing. If it doesn't, and the landlord decides otherwise, well, we just have to think again. We just have to look at it then.
Okay, thank you. Just two more to go, and our next one is from Alan Merson, who is 64 years old and based in North London. He's also the administrator for the Beyond the Pennine Roundabout Forum. Alan asks, what changed in the period between you opting not to pursue acquiring the football club and when you did? And he goes on to say, was it because when you did, you were able to acquire it in lieu of monies owed to you by the previous ownership and before there had been an asking price? So a long question.
Yeah. Interesting forum name as well.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's look at how we arrived here. We had a call that said there's a club you might want to talk to because they have some problems and they want to do new things, and they've got particular areas that they need investment and they need to get money. Not necessarily at that point in the short term. So we had a look, and we decided that this was worth pursuing, and we started in that process, and we started discussions, and we started looking at the club in a bit more detail. Then what happened is that was all speeded up because, for a number of reasons, the club got itself into a bit of financial difficulty. It was running out of money rapidly. And we reacted to that position and said, okay, we'll fund in some loans. So this is where probably the loans in the question comes from. So we'll put in some loans whilst we're getting on with this process and going through that. And in the middle of that process, the club said, actually, we're talking to some people who want to acquire the club. And at that point, we stood aside. So we said, okay, well, that's fine.
So talking to people other than you guys, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we stood aside and said, okay, that's fine. Let us know how you go, and that's exactly what we did. And that resulted in it ended up in a meeting called hastily, and at that point we had a week to make a decision, because essentially those who they were talking to, the club was talking to, had, for whatever reason, gone away, and we took that decision within that week, and we ended up here. So it was from a long start process. The final decision was pretty hasty, and it had to be, and that's the decision we took.
The former chairman, David Phillips, has gone on record to say that if Gaming International, or if somebody didn't step into the breach, there was a serious, real risk of the club going into administration. Now that you did step into the breach, and we've talked about skeletons in the cupboard, in terms of actual financials, and I know you don't want to talk about too specific of figures, has certain things come to light that have surprised you, as we talked about before? And do you feel like you are learning lessons in football club ownership that perhaps you weren't aware of?
Okay. Well, the when we had to make the decision, I think that the alternative to us making that decision was administration. Having taken that decision, as I've said previously, I mentioned some skeletons. There were some surprises, but you know that's life. Do I, or have I found that chairing a football club was different than I anticipated? Yes, in many ways, but fundamentally, this club is a business which is what we would term a customer fronting business. It has a lot of responsibilities to supporters beyond normal customers, but it functions in that way, and that's an environment that I'm pretty comfortable in. I understand that. The side of football is a learning curve for me, but essentially I don't have to be an expert, and I shouldn't be an expert in that area because the club has experts, and that's how it functions. So I'm pretty comfortable there. What was the other part of the question?
Well, it kind of leads on a little bit. I was talking about the investment that you've put in already, and it perhaps leads on to what was our final question from Pete Fordham from Newton Abbot. He wants to know about, obviously I've talked about the investment. Pete Fordham goes on to ask about, will you build a stadium first before Plainmoor is developed or redeveloped or whatever happens here to ensure that the football club always has a home? So I suppose we've talked about the investment you've done already into this current home. He's asking, will Torquay United always have a home?
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, go back to the sort of end of the last question. We'll move on to that one. In terms of investment, I mean, again, where we are, so that you understand or supporters understand the level of investment. I mean, by the time we get to the end of the season, so it's not very far away, our investment will have topped $500,000, and we know it's not going to stop there. So it's big. It's a big investment. This isn't a something that you can do lightly or you can do without commitment. Going on to the next question, does a new stadium need to be in place before anything happens to the old stadium? Well, the short answer is yes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, this club is a big club, and there aren't a set of circumstances where, in my view, you can you can't take a holiday for a season and say, "Oh, we'll be back next year," and you can't go and play somewhere else. So you can't go and play on a local team's pitch. I mean, well, you look at it. I mean, you 2,000 plus supporters. You can't accommodate them. I mean, you couldn't even get a registration within the National League. You can't provide the facilities. So it's a good question, but the answer to me is obvious. I mean, absolutely, you have to have the new home in place, and indeed in the logistics of it, if and when it comes, and I hope it very much will, has to be the you have to move in the close season. I mean, you can't even move mid-season, so it all has to be carefully dealt with. But yeah, absolutely, you've got to do that.
Clarke, I think we've certainly endeavoured to cover all areas of questions that have been asked. Thank you very much for sitting in the hot seat and doing it for us. Just so our supporters know, next week we're going to continue this theme. Jeff Harrop's going to be sat where you're sat. So any questions for him? Yes, good luck, Jeff. Send them to questions@torquayunited.com. For now, thank you very much to Clarke Osborne.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.